Welcome back to Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. Last time, the standard was raised. I repeat, the standard was raised. That kind of sounds like a spy code word. But anyway, we beat a two-part chapter, which is a kind of chapter we won't be having for a very long time, but it was kind of interesting and it helped us gain a bit more experience. We also gained a new ally who I'm gonna have to talk about in the base. But let's see what's next for the Daein Liberation Army.
The Liberation Army's sweeping victory seems to signal a turn in the war for Daein. However, General Jared uses his superior numbers to harry the group and threaten their fragile momentum. Benyan has fortified its army with weapons and supplies bought with funds stolen from Daein. Benyan has also purchased the swords of a vast number of mercenaries from these same stolen funds. The Liberation Army does not want for willing fighters of its own. However, most are old men and inexperienced boys whose passion far outstrips their skill.
Something a lot of people like to quote when talking about the Dawn Brigade.
The Liberation Army has no choice. It must bolster its ranks if it is to meet Benyan on equal terms. Its only hope lies locked in Benyan's prison camps, where Daein's former soldiers await their rescue.
Remember all those mentions of prison camps before? Turns out that was a Chekhov's gun. Admittedly, it does feel a bit weird just how quickly the tide turns in the war for Daein. That's one of the problems with Part 1, I feel, is how compressed the whole thing is. They have to tell the war for an entire country in the span of just 10 chapters. But they work with what they have. And, oh no, not again. Why do I get the feeling that you're involved in that? Well, we knew this was coming sooner or later. So, what's your brilliant plan this time? I feel like Umono's name was not changed from the Japanese version. Ah, so you're using Colonel Chenkov strategies. That's Warhammer 40k, if you don't get that. Obviously, Mikaya's not going to condone that, but... Not really sure how he managed to shove Toronu out of the way. This is a very good point. We don't want to cause damage to our reputation. And if we ended up killing people in the surrounding villages, all the prisoners we're trying to rescue, that'd be bad for this guy and Peleus. So we'll need a new plan. Please get out of here. When he gets excited, I think he's lost sight of reason all the time. And that whole reputation issue is pretty important as well. So, what's our plan? Fade to black. So, this is what TV tropes would call an unspoken plan guarantee. The chance of a plan succeeding is greatly increased if you don't tell the audience the plan. So we'll have to wait until the chapter itself to find out. Let's start with info, as I'm gonna do that for most of the chapters now. Oh, I know what this conversation is. Okay, yeah, I've been looking forward to this, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you have too. So, yeah, Meg is one of Brom's daughters. He has several. And that's why I question marked out Meg's bond support in her bio, because that would have ruined this joke. It's Brom. Z-Hawk, I think you should have figured out by now where this is going. So, this is actually a reference to Brom and Z-Hawk's supports from Path of Radiance. I said back during that playthrough that I feel like every support in that game is canon. There's actually a lot of supports from that game that end up having payoffs in Radiant Dawn. This is one of them, and it's a pretty obscure support. I remember I actually did this support on a whim in one of my playthroughs because I happened to be using both Brom and Z-Hawk. And imagine my surprise when I got to Radiant Dawn and found out that support actually was referenced in Radiant Dawn, somewhat. So yeah, Brom supports with Z-Hawk were pretty much all about Brom trying to marry off Z-Hawk to one of his daughters. And this is the payoff. She's reminding me of Melissa from Mystery of the Emblem now, actually. So, there's a quote from TV tropes that I think sums this up very, very well. Meg is essentially the punchline to Brom and Z-Hawk supports from Path of Radiance. It is kind of a shame that Meg really only exists as a joke, but there are some people who feel like Meg would have been a little bit better used if she'd, been used in other ways. I feel like maybe Meg could have joined during part 2 instead, but she'd probably have to be second tier then. Anyway, on to this conversation. A bit of mood whiplash. This one's not comedic at all. It's also a very long base conversation, at least by base conversation standards. Probably because Izuka demanded that, and does not have a hidden agenda behind that in any way. I knew it. Of course you need his permission. Peleus does not have a lot of authority despite being a prince. Yes, he is your most faithful and trusted advisor. That's what they all say before they get backstabbed. And that's what we call a natural 20 insight check. Or something else. So, where have we seen this kind of power before? This reminds me about how there's a lot of people who wish you could pair Micaiah with Peleus instead of Soth. And now we change the topic of this conversation entirely. This was brought up in Path of Radiance. If you want to know the full details of how this works, look up Khalil and Tormod supports. It gets pretty disturbing. Though I'm not sure Peleus knows the full details. Notice how Micaiah is always wearing those gloves? And here's yet more exposition for people who didn't play the last game, although admittedly the whole concept of branded was, I don't think, ever mentioned directly in the story of that game. It was just mentioned in supports. Let's just say that in this one, the branded are a lot more plot relevance. And Peleus still seems to have inherited that common Daean prejudice. I think you can probably tell where this is going. And, like most conversations in Radiant Dawn, we get an item out of it, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with the conversation itself. You'd think that he'd give you, like, a spirit dust or something like that, just to better relate to the conversation, but no, it's a sword. Micaiah really shouldn't be keeping this, though. Except, by giving this to Micaiah and having her do the exact same thing, it's kind of the same problem. And we get a really good sword out of that, a brave sword. I said earlier that we'd be getting some very strong swords later on. Firstly, though, let's just check out Aime's bargains, because I like to do that before... I like to do that as one of the first things to do in the base. So, we've got some very expensive stat boosters here. But, another Wind Edge. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. Yeah, let's just go ahead and get another one of those. And, yeah, might as well give that to Edward. Actually... yeah, I've got an idea. Okay, so Edward can now go ahead and trade this slightly beaten up, but not that bad Wind Edge over to Zhark and take that one back. Speaking of Zhark, you're going to go ahead and conquer that Master Seal. Got 3 of those already. Okay, that's Seraph Robe. Good thing I remembered. Jill, your HP's not that bad, but I'm going to want me to use that now. Okay, now, if I'm right, I think your HP cap is 35? It's probably not 40. Could have given that to Aaron too, but Aaron's pretty close to maxing some of his stats. Something that I should also... Well, first thing I should do is... I almost forgot. Hi there. This is Fiona. She at least comes with 2 pretty useful skills. Oh boy! It's Meg's eternal rival for the position of worst Dawn Brigade character. Fiona I just find downright sad because she had the potential to be decent, it's just that everything in the game seems to be conspiring against her. A lot of people make jokes that Game Freak must have hated Flareon for some reason and that's why they kept constantly shafting it. I feel like someone on the dev team must have hated Fiona with a passion because the game is just not kind to her from the moment she joins. I'll get into her positives first though. 1, Earth Affinity. That's already one up over Meg, who had the exact opposite. Secondly, she starts with some pretty nice skills. Having both Imbue and Savior for free is pretty decent, especially Savior, which gives her some utility even if she isn't trained. Savior means you don't lose any skill and speed for rescuing someone, and Imbue is the reason why Renewal is not that good in this game. Imbue restores HP equal to the user's magic stat at the start of every turn. Obviously it's for physical classes only, but even on them, look at those 3rd tier caps on Fiona. At maximum, you're recovering 20 HP per turn, which far outstrips the 10% healing from Renewal. Later in the game, Imbue will outclass Renewal 99% of the time, so it's a good skill to have. But now we get on to the negatives. So Fiona's growths aren't that bad, she's got some pretty decent growth in the defensive stats and speed. And her strength growth isn't awful. The problem is she joins at level 8 with bases that are more fitting for a level 1 character, and a terrible starting rank in Lancers. And there aren't many chapters to go in part 1, so she doesn't have much opportunity to be trained. But the real kicker is that it seems like every remaining chapter in part 1 is designed to screw her over in some way and make her nearly impossible to train. Don't believe me? I'll go over them now. 1-7 is an indoor map, so that's -2 movement, and it has a lot of ledges which horses can't climb. In 1-8, the majority of the map consists of a swamp that horses can't enter. Of course, this doesn't actually mean anything because for some arbitrary reason, you can't even deploy Fiona in 1-8. I know, doesn't make much sense to me either. 1-9 you also can't deploy Fiona in, but that one does make sense. Then it's 1 endgame. Yep, Fiona only has 1 chapter and then it's part 1 endgame. And it's also an indoor map, so -2 movement, it's even more filled with ledges than 1-7, and in general, it's just not a good place to train her. But hey, maybe when the Dawn Brigade returns in part 3, things will be good for her. Oh wait, the first Dawn Brigade chapter in part 3 is a swamp map and horses can't enter swamps. Again, I just feel really bad for Fiona because if she joined towards the beginning of part 1, she actually might have been decent. It's just that training her is nearly impossible. To give you an idea, I've trained Meg before, but I have never tried to train Fiona. Making this worse is the fact that Paladins aren't even that good in Radiant Dawn. They probably took notice of how broken they were in the last game, and in this game, Paladins don't have very good caps, and I've mentioned the limitations of horse-mounted units many times. So even a 3rd tier Fiona isn't really worth the effort. The only playthroughs I've heard of that use Fiona trained her via either boss abuse or priest statue abuse, which is something that I'll talk about later. But overall, Fiona is just a character I feel really sad for. So with that out of the way, one thing that I want to show is that you still have access to Tyronio's inventory during this base, but he will not be usable for any other chapter in part 1, so if you want to get any items out of his inventory, do so now. In this case, I need to get rid of that red gem and that vulnerary. I do kind of like to keep Tyronio's weapons on him, because when he rejoins back in part 3, he'll be needing his weapons, so I'll keep these for now, but if you want a free silver lance, you can feel free to take this at this point in the game. Okay, you also have the Paragon Scroll, let's convoy that, and the Brave Sword, it's generally best on Zehawk, but I'm going to give it to Edward because I like Edward. And let's see everyone else. Soft should be fine. I think most others should be fine with weapons at this point. Yeah, Jill's Wormclaw's probably okay. I was just thinking that I could use that coin that I picked up in the last chapter to just demonstrate what coins do for forging. but I don't really have all that much money at the moment, and I might want to save it for some of the later bargains. And it's not like I really need to forge a weapon desperately. Let's just go ahead and check out. I think everything is the same at the armory. Yep, nothing's changed here. And I think nothing's changed in terms of your actual items as well. Don't need this iron longbow. Leonardo is the only other person in part 1 who can use this, so no real reason for me to buy that now. And let's see if there are any new supports we can do. Vol can only support Micaiah, not Zehawk, unfortunately. I really want to set that up, but not yet. I also really want to show one of Volug's converse dialogues, because they're actually really great, if you can understand Ancient Tongue. And it seems like, yeah, that's pretty much all we can do there. So, I could give bonus experience to some people. So, like, for example, look at this. I have enough bonus experience to raise Micaiah all the way up to level 19. And, for example, I could raise Soth quite a few levels too. I still might want to save this bonus experience for now because nobody's capped any stats, but I think next chapter I might even be second tiering some people. I'm not used to being able to second tier people this early, but yeah, this is normal mode, not hard mode. One thing that I will do though is skills. So, we just got a very important skill in the last chapter, Paragon. Doubles experience points, though I should mention that in this game, Paragon does not affect bonus experience, which actually makes it a lot worse than it was in the last game. But Paragon is extremely useful, but in part 1, there are only a few people who have the capacity for it at base. Micaiah, Soth will only to get rid of Renewal, and Zehawk. Toronu doesn't count because he's going to be leaving after this chapter. A lot of people like to give it to Zehawk, but here's the thing, I feel like the game really wants you to give this to Micaiah so that she hits level 20 before the end of part 1. And because of that, even though it's not technically the best thing in the world, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Like I said, the game really wants you to have Micaiah hit level 20 before part 1 is over, and I think you're supposed to use Paragon, yeah, and when you remove a skill from someone, it becomes a skill scroll and goes into their inventory, so just be careful of that when it comes to inventory space. Is there anyone else here who can make decent, I mean, Volug probably, because he actually does take decent damage from enemies. Of course, on Zehawk it'd kind of be overkill, but... So later in the game, there's no reason to use Renewal over Imbue. In fact, even now, Soth's recovering 5 with, Imbue. But just look at this on Toronu, for example. 12 magic. That's 12 HP heal per turn with Imbue. That is a lot more than Renewal will be healing him for. And it only gets better as you hit 3rd tier, when even most physical units have a magic cap of like 20. And most of them go up to around 65 HP, so healing 20 per turn is a lot more than 10%. Right, who do I give Resolve to is the real question. I mean, it's not like Zehawk is going to be taking a lot of... I guess he does take damage sometimes. But he doesn't really need more speed. This could at least help Volug with dodging, and it is better than nothing, so I might as well put that on you. As for Fortune, doesn't really matter who I give it to. Might as well, even though it's kind of pointless. And I think that's all I'll do for skills now. I'm really liking Cancel on Edward, so I'm going to keep that for the moment. And let's move out to the actual chapter. Here we are at Umoro Prison Camp. So we have our first indoor chapter since 1-2, and our first indoor chapter where the indoor mounted unit penalty is actually relevant. You could say, yeah, it's an enemy ambush. Now I'm just picturing Gordon saying that in his OVA voice, and it's horrifying to my ears. That's what every generic boss in Fire Emblem says. I think I have an idea of what the plan is now. Again, that's what every generic boss says. This camp is unconquerable, and, yeah. But once again, we have height bonuses in effect in this map. And this is why Toronu isn't playable for the rest of Part 1. Or at least not for this chapter. He's gone to take the main army to attack the outside, while we sneak in and free the prisoners. That was the plan. And with that, I'll see you back on the preparation screen for the actual chapter.